Hello, hello, and welcome to Penguins Lunch, brought to you as always by InsideThePenguins.com. I'm your host, Nick Brlansky, and joined today by a very special guest as I welcome on Seth Rorabaugh of the Tribune Review. How you doing today, Seth?
Very good. Yourself, Nick?
Doing pretty good. Obviously, it is the dark days of the NHL offseason, so everybody's just looking for something to talk about. And I think we have a good lineup here of topics that will cover everything from head to toe Pittsburgh Penguins if you're ready to go.
Certainly. Let's go.
Well, I want to start this off because it's called Penguins Lunch, not only because of when we air it, but also because I like to ask my guests the first thing as soon as we start, what is your favorite lunch spot in the city of Pittsburgh?
Gosh, my house probably. Oftentimes, when I grab lunch, especially during a game day, it's I grab something, maybe local grocery store, and just write some notes, transcribe some stuff at my house on my couch here. So that's probably a really terrible, lazy answer, but now I'll maybe try to localize this a little bit. I enjoy the smoked chicken wrap at the UPMC complex up in Cranberry. That's usually a go-to for me up there. The crew up there, in fact, they don't even bother asking me what I want to eat. They'll just say, one smoked chicken wrap, and they'll make it, and I pay for it, and that's it. So, yeah, if you allow me to venture up to Cranberry, that's probably my favorite there.
Yeah, definitely an acceptable answer, and an answer that actually gives me a little hint. So next time I'm up there, I can go up there and try the smoked chicken wrap. I appreciate that.
Side of quinoa is not bad either. Also.
All right, a little spice on the side. I like it. I like where your head's at, Seth. But let's talk a little bit about the Pittsburgh Penguins, because that's what a lot of people are going to be tuning in to hear. Among other things, when I look at the Kasperi-Kapanen deal, which is the latest move made by the Penguins, it seems to me like a vote of confidence from the front office in a young player that was drafted by the organization that they feel has a lot more to give than what he showed last season. What do you think they're looking for from him going into next year?
I think they're looking for a guy who can score 20 goals and 50 points or so. I think that's a fair expectation for Kasperi-Kapanen, given his pedigree, given his skill set, just given the natural talents I think he has, and obviously given maybe the pay that he just received here with this new contract. So they seem to still see the potential in him, and he's a guy that. I think he cares. I mean, I don't think there's anything part of him that his struggles are out of apathy or anything like that. He cares, and maybe sometimes the way in how he cares, it leads to him maybe having some down moments here or there. But they certainly still see the potential in him. Mike Sullivan has something of I think I want to say a soft spot for him. And I think he showed it a little bit, during his first season, the 2021 season, even when he was dealing with, I think, the COVID quarantine restrictions because of immigration or whatever it was. Mm-hmm. He was the guy that really kind of, got Evgeny Malkin's season, the little bit he played pretty well during that season. Kasperi-Kapanen was the one who really kind of jump-started Malkin that season. So, where he fits in the lineup, I don't see it being anywhere beyond, say, the third line. I still think it's Brian Rust and Rickard Rakell 1-2, whatever order you want to place those two in. But I think they like him, being in the mix there. Maybe they like to see him play with some with Jeff Carter. There was a little bit of chemistry at times there last year, but again, I think you can fairly expect him or hope for him to be a 20-goal, 50-point type of player.
Mm-hmm. And I think the big thing that he mentioned, especially at his end of the year press conference, was I got in my own way. It was a little bit mental. I didn't have the confidence that I usually have. And that's something that over the summer, I think the Penguins are looking at and saying, hey, you need to get your mind right. We're giving you this contract because we believe that you can play up to that standard. And that's what it seems like the front office hoping is that this summer he takes his time to reset, come out and show what he showed with that 30 points in 40 games, as you mentioned, in his first stint back with the Pittsburgh Penguins last season, or 2 seasons ago, I should say.
Yeah. I mean, he's been a 20-goal scorer. He was a 20-goal scorer up in Toronto, and there's certainly a pressure-filled environment there. Mm-hmm. Certainly no less here. I would argue here in Pittsburgh, just given the immediacy that this franchise has in terms of wanting to win a Stanley Cup now, given the age of the core here. So I'd be curious to see if they maybe use him some other ways too starting next year. I know he's always kind of lobbied to be a penalty killer. He did that in Toronto. He was pretty potent, shorthanded goal scorer in Toronto, but they've never seemed to use him in that capacity here in Pittsburgh. It's been, I've asked Mike Sullivan a handful of times about it, and he says, yeah, he's done it well in Toronto, and never really ever seemed to entertain the idea of him doing it here in Pittsburgh. So, again, there's a lot of potential still there, but it's upon him to really start to finally realize it here. I mean, he's going to be, I think he just turned 26, I believe, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, he's well past, the stage of his career where, he's trying to figure things out. He's been an NHL player for many years now, and again, I think the expectations of him, they're heavy, but I think it's fairly heavy.
Mm-hmm. Let's shift gears here quickly to the blue line, because obviously the last couple of weeks have been centered around the Pittsburgh Penguins defense corps. But as it stands currently, they have 9 NHL defensemen that are either on the roster, or if you want to throw in a guy like POJ who expects to try to graduate to that level this year. The point is they have a lot of guys on that blue line, and only realistically 6 spots that they're going to use unless Sullivan chooses to use 7 defensemen in a game, which doesn't normally happen. But do you believe that before training camp begins, we're going to see another move to send out one of those blue liners?
I'm not necessarily sure it'd be before, training camp, but they have to get cap compliant by, before October 13th. I mean, I think I saw there maybe 1.3 million over the salary cap for cap friendly. So, someone has to move, presumably a defenseman, just to get compliant with the salary cap. And by the way, they still, I think, fairly have some holes in their bottom 6 forwards that they could fill out with maybe a 1-year deal or 2 in the bottom, to fill out those roles. So, but independent of the salary cap, independent of how the bottom 6 forwards look, I mean, you have 9 defensemen, as you said. You can send Ty Smith to Wilkes-Barre Scranton because he's still exempt from waivers, and that can help you get around that problem a little bit on a temporary basis. But that would leave you with 8, and you'd be scratching someone who probably should be in your lineup on a regular basis. So I just think for a variety of reasons they have to make a move between now and whenever the first day of cap compliance is required. I think it's usually maybe like the day before the season or whatever, but either way they have to make some kind of move there, just for a variety of reasons. Most notably though, just for the sake of their salary cap, they're a little bit over right now.
And with that current group of 9, obviously, who would you say are the 3 that right now would be on the outside looking in? If you were to make the lineup, obviously we haven't seen what Sullivan thinks with all the new additions and the subtractions, but who would you think are the 3 guys that are fighting to get into that top 6 as of right now?
Well, if you stick strictly with righty lefty, guys playing the right side, guys playing the left side, I think it looks like Chad Ruhwedel, Mark Friedman, and Ty Smith would probably be the ones on the outside looking in. And it's probably not fair to Chad Ruhwedel after really finally breaking through, as a regular for the first time in his career in 10 years. But you look at the 2 prominent additions here, Jan Ruda and Jeff Petrie, both right side guys. I know Jan Ruda can play left side, so maybe there's something to be said there for him flipping over and playing the left side there. But if you stick with everyone on their right side and everyone on their left side, that, and with no other further changes to the roster, no trades, that's kind of how it shakes out. So I mean, I think the one guy everyone looks at is Marcus Pettersson, just because his contract, it's 4.25 or whatever it is. He's over $4 million. If you trade him, you get a lot of much needed salary cap space. And I think that would help you in a lot of ways. And that's not to say, there's dissatisfaction with Marcus Pettersson. I think he's played more than adequate for the most part. Maybe plateaued the last year or 2, but he's been more than adequate. Just he happens to make too much money, and that's no fault of his own. But I honestly think if he was a right-handed defenseman, he would be off the roster by now, because right-handed defensemen tend to be a little more valuable as a trade commodity or whatnot. But that's one guy I look at and say, yeah, I just don't know how he fits onto this roster right now. Primarily because of his salary cap. Nothing bad about his play, but if you move him, maybe you move Jan Ruda to the left side there, then you shake some other things out there. But yeah, that's the one guy I look at, and I don't think I'm going on a limb here or anything like by saying this, but that's the one guy you look at and say, yeah, where does he exactly fit in on this roster right now?
And I think the other name that usually comes up too is Brian Dumoulin, simply because he's heading into a contract year, but again, has that modified no trade, makes it harder to trade him in the first place, and is coming off that MCL injury, which again, other teams are going to look at that and say, well, where's the value in that? He makes over $4 million as well. But when you look at a guy like Pettersson, if If you move Dumoulin, who's going up there with Letang? That's my biggest question. If not Dumoulin, then who?
Yeah, I as far as moving Dumoulin, I think it would be difficult just based on him being a left side guy. You just wouldn't get the return. And obviously, a move like this, you're just trying to clear cap space. That would be the ultimate return. But also, too, I think it just would run counter to what they've done here the past month or 2 months here in terms of bringing everyone back more or less in terms of the core pieces. And I would throw Brian Dumoulin in there as maybe that secondary core piece, guys like along the lines of say Jake Gensel or Brian Ross or Rickard Raquel. I mean, I think you would really I don't want to say you would sour the room or anything like that, but you'd remove a pretty significant piece of that room in terms of being a prominent voice there. He's kind of supplanted, guys like Patrick Hornquist or, if you want to go way back, Brooks Orpik as being kind of like the voice in the room, the guy that kind of rallies everyone. He's the guy that will kind of pull, younger guys aside if they make a mistake during the game and kind of settle them down and things like that. So I think you would move a major component of that room if you did move Brian Dumoulin on. And again, that's not to dismiss any other factors there. And again, his salary, his age, just what you might get out of return for him. So, but just from an intangible standpoint, I think you would really, you would run counter to what this team's largely done, or what this management team's largely done here for the past 2 months in terms of retaining just about all the core pieces here.
Mm-hmm. And another piece of that core that you just mentioned is Jake Gensel. With how busy this entire offseason has been, I feel like not many people have discussed what Jake Gensel was able to do last season. 40 goals, 84 points, obviously both career highs for that. Do you feel like he is still underrated among national media or even in Pittsburgh based on the talent that he's been able to go out there and show off and the points and the production that he's been able to go out there and produce?
Yeah, probably a little bit. And hey, I mean, just you play in Pittsburgh, you're always going to get overshadowed by Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, Chris Letang, etc. And also, I think a big part of it too is when you watch Jake Gensel, I mean, it's not like he has some blistering one timer like the way Evgeny Malkin does, or just a dagger of a backhander the way Sidney Crosby does. He doesn't have like a signature shot, a signature play, like an Ovechkin one timer, or Connor McDavid just skating through. He just kind of collects goals. He just happens to be around that. Oops, there's a puck. I can shoot it. He just happens to find goals in really weird ways. And again, he's not like a big, power forward type, like say, like a Tom Wilson or even maybe Patrick Hornquist, where he's just battling in front, getting goals. I mean, he just happens to know where to get them. So he happens to do his business very successfully, but in a very subtle way that I don't think really catches a lot of eyes. And I think that probably leads to him maybe having something of a low profile. And frankly, his personality is kind of subtle and under the radar too. So again, I do think he is underrated. I think there are a variety of reasons for it, but I don't think that means he's any less effective or valuable to this team. I mean, he's a 40 goal scorer. He really obviously has a ton of chemistry with Sidney Crosby, and that's always been something of a struggle here in Pittsburgh for many years, going way back. So finding wingers that can work with Sidney Crosby. So there's plenty of value there, even if it doesn't necessarily get a lot of attention.
Mm-hmm. I don't think you're going to be seeing Jake Gensel very much on SportsCenter's top plays for his flash and flare.
Yeah, for getting those pucks that happen to be like a little rebound that trickles across the line, or something off his leg or something like that. I mean, he's just, if you're not really paying attention to the Penguins very closely, and you see Jake Gensel with 40 goals, you're like, really? How? But again, he just has that knack for knowing where to be around the net, and being very opportunistic, and just there's something to be said for that.
And you mentioned it works really well with Sidney Crosby. That's the reason those two have been basically staple gun together for the last 3 or 4 seasons. I mean, unless Crosby's out, then it's with Malkin, and it still works. So I think there's something to be said there as well. The fact that Gensel can do it with both of the star centers, not just one of them, which is something we've seen in the past. But the question I want to ask, and this is something that I put out as a hot take last year, and clearly it didn't happen, was the 100-point plateau for Jake Gensel in his season. How likely do you think it is that he reaches that at some point in his career? And how likely do you think it is that he can do it next season?
Well, if he's going to do it, it would probably be next season. Let's see how the NHL plays overall this season. I mean, you look around the league, well, I think there were maybe upwards of 10 100-point scores, something like that. I mean, that was the most 100-point scores I think the league had seen since the 05-06 season, when They were just coming out of the lockout, and there were a ton of new rules, penalties geared towards offense. Just for whatever reason, a variety of reasons, this past year the NHL saw an offensive boom. Saw kind of franchise records all over the place, kind of falling. So I think first off, the atmosphere is ripe, or the soil is fertile for something like that right now in the NHL. To have Jake Gensel be a 100-point scorer, I don't think it'd be outlandish just given that. I think you would need to see him and Sidney Crosby together be healthy for the bulk of the season. Obviously Sidney Crosby missed the first handful of games of the season. Had a little bit of a setback with COVID, so his season kind of got off to a slow start. And I think that had a trickle down effect on how productive Jake Gensel wasn't. Maybe the first month of the season or so. So like I said, I think the atmosphere right now is pretty ripe for any kind of player to be a 100-point scorer right now, and or to set some kind of career highs in offensive and figures. And with Sidney Crosby presumably being healthy for a full season, I think that would go a long way towards Jake Gensel maybe reaching that mark.
You mentioned Gensel getting off to a slow start. Part of that was because his center at times was Evan Rodriguez, and nothing against Rodriguez, but there is a drop-off there. I think everybody is fair to say there's a drop-off from Sidney Crosby to Evan Rodriguez, but 2 weeks into free agency, both Rodriguez and Danton Heinen, former Penguin, are still on the market. Do you think that there's any way that the Penguins circle back to that if it gets a little bit closer to the beginning of training camp and the Penguins know that they want to figure something else out?
Well, it seems like there's a larger problem, not problem, but situation in the whole here with the NHL. I mean, you see a guy like Nazem Kadri still unsigned, and I just don't think there's a lot of teams right now that have a lot of cap space that they're willing to maybe commit this to contracts, whether it's a prominent player like that or maybe kind of a secondary role player like Evan Rodriguez or Danton Heinen. Correct me if I'm wrong, I think John Klingberg is still maybe unsigned. Is that correct?
Yeah, so that's correct.
I mean, that's the caliber of player you're talking about right now that's unsigned from the top on down. So if the Penguins go back there, I think independent of the cap and anything like that, I think the Penguins absolutely would love to entertain, bringing either one of those players back. I can tell you Mike Sullivan would really like to bring Evan Rodriguez back if they can make it work financially. But to circle back to Marcus Pettersson, I think they'd have to figure out what's going on there, or their blue line in general in terms of getting compliant with salary cap before they can bring in another forward to help fill out their bottom six, as I talked about earlier. So definitely, I mean, if it wasn't for their salary cap right now where it is, I think the Penguins definitely would have entertained bringing either of those guys back. And frankly, the only reason they didn't qualify Danton Heinen when he was a restricted free agent, scheduled to be a restricted free agent, and they didn't qualify him because they were scared of him getting an arbitration number that was just way too big for their purposes. So again, just as players, I think they definitely would like to, have those guys back on the roster, but the business of hockey really maybe is precluding them from doing that. And again, they're not alone. When you look at some of the bigger names still out there, more than a week here, almost 2 weeks, I guess now, after free agency has started.
And PJ would also agree with Mike Sullivan there. Says, I would love to have Erod back. I don't care what anybody else feels about him, which I feel like there's also a large portion of the Penguins fan base that feels the same exact way as you, PJ. But I want to finish this off, Seth. First and foremost, thank you so much for joining us here on Penguins Lunch. But I do have one last quick segment I like to call Quick Dishes here on Penguins Lunch. It's just a couple rapid fire questions, not anything really serious. And we'll go in and out from based on Penguins related questions and just lunch related questions.
I'm sure, as anyone can tell by my beard here, there's nothing serious about me whatsoever. So
let's start off with this one. More exciting time in the NHL calendar, the beginning of the season or the beginning of the playoffs?
I would say playoffs. This is the most jaded, selfish way to look at things. But to me, that's, first off, I can start looking at hotels and, travel arrangements. So if I can get a good deal, particularly with hotels, rack up those Marriott points, that's a very selfish thing. I think every hockey writer would tell you about. And also, frankly, too, that's close to, an off season there at some point. That's close to not having to go to practice every single day. Again, that's a very selfish, jaded way of looking at things. But when you do this job for, 10 months of the year, 24/7, it seems like, you enjoy some free time, you enjoy some selfish things. So But yeah, for me, when the playoffs get started, but maybe not necessarily for the reason most fans would think of.
Fair enough. Better summer cookout food, burgers or hot dogs?
Can I say shish kebabs?
You can. Yeah. Option C.
Uh, yeah, I like a good shish kebab. I load it up with Old Bay seasoning, which that's probably isn't the healthiest thing in the world, but Old Bay seasoning, you maybe think of that more for seafood, but you can put it on just about anything. Corn. I grew a corn on the cob as well, so that's my summer go-to meal right there.
I like it. I like it. Back into the hockey realm, what position would you play if you were to make it to the NHL?
Oh, I'd be a stay-at-home defenseman, and frankly, I probably should be a stay-on-the-couch defenseman. When I played DAC hockey back in the day, I was a defensive specialist, blocked a lot of shots, had a lot of bruised shins because of that. I think just the less mobility that's required of me, I think the better.
I mean, if the Penguins ever need a 10th NHL defenseman on the roster, you should give them your number.
It would be league minimum, so.
There you go. Perfect. Fits under the cap as well. Better summer trip, camping or going to the beach?
I like to go to the beach, then stop off at my buddy's lake home up near Shanksville, Pennsylvania. So on the way home. So a little bit of each. Let's put it that way. I'm being selfish. I'll take a little bit of each. Both have the very redeeming qualities. Largely, if I go somewhere where I can see less people, that's probably the best for me.
I like it. And the last question, Seth, thank you again for joining us here on Penguins Lunch. But the last question from Quick Dishes, which would you rather do if given the opportunity, golf with Mario Lemieux or fish with Sidney Crosby?
I'd say fish because I know how terrible of a golfer I am. I fish very poorly on the side every so often here, and I enjoy just the peaceful nature of it. So I would just say fishing just based on previous experiences in both activities.
Well, that's it. That's all I have for you, Seth. Thank you so much for joining us. Let our listeners know where they can find you on Twitter, on any social media, on Trib Live, of course, and what else you have coming up for the Tribune Review.
Triblive.com is, wherever everything I do is right there. Twitter's at Seth Rorabaugh. And what I have coming up is nothing. I got a lot of vacation come up here in August. And I always joke that August is my favorite part of the hockey calendar. So.
Well-deserved, Seth, and thank you for taking a little bit of time here before we got to that minimum right there. Before August 1st, I caught you before your vacation month.
Fair enough.
Thank you so much.
Take care, Nick.